Welcome to the Sharpway Show. A little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. I'm so happy you're giving me a little chunk of your evening to chat with someone who I think is a very interesting guest. Most of you who are paying attention to politics know that when it came to 2020, a really big reason why Biden was able to take the Democratic nomination and become president was because of one specific South Carolina congressman by the name of Clyburn. And he's a very powerful Democrat in South Carolina and a lot of impact that he's had on the country. And there's actually somebody running against him. Crazy, right? It's insane, right? Oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there is a young man compared to Clyburn who's over 80 now, who's actually running. And I want to bring him on to ask him about what he's trying to achieve. A lot of interesting ideas, very different in many ways from Congressman Clyburn. The man himself from South Carolina, running for Congress, Gregg Marcel Dixon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And for those of you who want to see what Marcel's doing, you can head over to Twitter if you like to and follow him on Marcel4, the number 4 if you're listening to this, Marcel4 Congress on Twitter. His information also is on the YouTube page and also on the Facebook page. So, Marcel, I have to ask you the question. Why go up against Clyburn? I mean, he's a giant. He's a monster. This is a big task. You're not going against some chump you could just beat up. This is a serious guy.
Well, one, I live in his district. And my district, as I discovered, is the 6th poorest district out of the 436 districts in the United States of America. And that is by household income. So he's been there for 31 years. A lot of people like to say, well, the Republicans have ran South Carolina for decades. And yes, that's true. And they share the blame as well. But it's not the Republicans who get the majority of the black vote. The majority of the black vote goes to the Democrats. So if Clyburn gets the votes, and he's definitely getting the check, that means he needs to get the accountability as well. And when I saw that this majority black district where I've lived my entire life is one of the poorest places in the United States of America, close to being the poorest, is in the condition it is in. But I have seen his material condition benefit and those closely affiliated with him. I said accountability is not just for the Republicans or conservatives. It needs to be for the Democrats and the liberals as well.
I know that your district is something like 90 some odd % of the kids qualify for school lunch. Is that about right? Something like that?
Oh, yes. In the black areas, yes.
That is, I mean, I remember as a kid, I grew up in the South Bronx in New York City when I was a kid. And I remember, and people used to ask me when I moved out of the South Bronx as older, people said, are you getting free lunch or are you paying for lunch? When I went to a school district outside of New York City, I was like, what? I didn't know you could pay for lunch because so many people, I found this out later, so many kids in my district got qualified for free school lunch. It didn't make administrative sense to pay for people to divvy it up. Just gave everybody free lunch. It didn't matter if there was so many. It's just crazy. So I understand that. But you're saying 30 years and basically no change. Now, you live in a very rural area, right?
Yes, very rural.
So that means there's opportunity with land, opportunity with maybe industry, opportunity, right? In a more urban area, tougher to make the changes, right? Because literally there's not much space. But in a rural area, you could bring in a large company, you could bring in a power plant, you could bring in an airport, something, right? You could do something to build something up. But that's not happening. In fact, you have an area, if I remember right, called the Corridor of Shame. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
The Corridor of Shame refers to a network of majority black or largely black rural counties located along South Carolina's Interstate 95 from the border of North Carolina down to the border of Georgia. I live in Jasper County, South Carolina, which is a part of the corridor of shame, right on the border of Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, where I was born. And it's known for not just its poverty, but also for its endemic academic failure. In some schools, like the school where I attended, you will have 70 to 90% of the students not reading on or above grade level. And to the anti-Black bigots out there, they will take that and run with the whole, you see, Black people just aren't as smart. No, it's not that Black people aren't as smart. There's nothing wrong with Black people, Black Americans. There's something definitely wrong with the conditions to which we've been subjected.
So let me touch that piece, right? Because as I keep moving down this road, what I liked when I was looking into how you feel and your thoughts, you matched with me on many things. And one of those is you make a distinction between ADOS, African descendants of slaves, and other people of color in America. And that's been changing. It's almost like everybody wants to be Black, right? But they don't want to be Black. They just want the advantages of being Black, but none of the disadvantages, right? And you make a distinction, which I love. You even make a distinction between immigrants, Black immigrants from Nigeria or Jamaica. You even make that distinction. And I 100% agree, but I struggle to find people who agree with me. Are you getting pushback, or are people going, yes, you're right? How is that happening for you? What kind of response are you getting?
I, growing up, had more of a Pan-African mentality, but even then, I knew that there's a difference between ADOS refers to American descendants of slavery. I don't like that term. I prefer to use the term freedmen because that is the actual government status of Black Americans who are descendants of American slaves. Growing up, however, my great-grandparents, I was fortunate enough, and I still have a great-grandparent who is still alive. He's 99. But I lived and was helped, partially raised by my great-grandmother who lived to be 101, born in 1914, raised by her grandparents who were enslaved. She died in 2015 when I was 31 years old. And she would take offense at someone referring to her as an African. She always made it clear that she was American. America was a home. My parents never liked being called African American. So no, I don't get a lot of pushback at all from the rural Black American people in my area when I say that we are different. We are not the same as a Jamaican. We're not the same as an Afro-Cuban. We're not the same as an Afro-Brazilian. The only people who give pushback are those who are like die-hard Pan-Africans. But more and more, legislatively, however, it has been a challenge getting people to understand you cannot do policies for Black people. It would be unconstitutional. Okay. And I tell them my main thing, I know you will get to, is reparations. When you look at the history of reparations, they've never been race-based. They've always been harm-based, and you have to be a member of the group that was harmed. Yes, this country has done atrocious things to Black people, and they were doing it up until the 1970s. So from the days of the British colony, from the 1600s to the 1970s, if you want to go here in South Carolina, there was government-sanctioned or government-initiated terrorism of Black people. But those were not Black people who came from Jamaica. Those were not Black people who came from Nigeria, Ethiopia. Those were the Black people who were enslaved and then emancipated here in the United States of America. Once people hear the explanation, they get it. When I explain to them that Native Americans don't just get a Native American settlement package, but they each get it according to their status or their tribe.
The government actually has a list and decides like what percentage makes you Native American and what tribes they accept as tribe. I do remember that because when I was running for governor in New York, we have tribes in New York State. And there are rules on what tribe is which and how you decide which one you're in. I get that. So I completely, and I'm with you. I think there is a difference between descendants of slaves. And secondly, also, I don't like the phrase African American either. I don't get mad at it. I don't care if it tells me that. But I prefer Black. Maybe I'm just old school. I don't know. I prefer Black. I remember my father being happy called Negro. My father was happy to be called Negro, right? He wasn't mad at that. He was like, that's good. Better than the other alternative. He will take that 100%. So, I do see that point. So let me move on to that because you talk about anti-Black racism and you want a reparations package And your package, if I remember right, is focused on not taxation, but instead debt from the Fed. And your logic, if I remember right, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that debt from the Fed is always given when the government needs money. Like they have enough, they can just write checks when it comes to a foreign aid. They can write checks when it comes to foreign wars. They can write checks when it comes to, COVID. So why can't they write checks for this? Am I kind of getting it right?
Sort of. So I look at the history of how reparations has been done in the United States of America, but I also look at present of how these large $1 trillion packages have been done in America. We can go with Donald Trump. Donald Trump did historic levels of spending. Whether you like him or not, these are just the facts. And, the COVID-19 pandemic came this way. He spent trillions having to pretty much rush the vaccines, do the publicity for the vaccines, distribute them. At the same time, he was having to bail out multiple corporations. He did the PPP loans. These were multi-trillion-dollar packages. Yet, years before Donald Trump did that, he cut taxes to one of their lowest rates ever. So if the government budget came from taxes, someone has to explain to me how Donald Trump was able to do that. You can go back to the days of Roosevelt, the New Deal. Roosevelt spent what will now be multi-trillions dollars, and he did it during the days of a Great Depression. So that obviously makes it clear that the government spending does not come from tax dollars federally. State-wise, yes. Now, a lot of people like to say, yes, but that's going to cause debt and that's going to cause inflation. The truth of the matter is debt is a myth. You can look at the history of America. We've canceled debt many, many times. Newsflash, we're canceling it right now. The PPP loan has seen over $1 trillion in debt just canceled. When America does have debt, however, they take that debt, and this is the point to where you were getting, and they monetize it, and they make it into something called cash bonds, which are pretty much yellow dollars. I'm too poor to have seen one myself. And those bonds are sold to corporations, or they're bought by banks, credit unions, other financial institutions.
So hold on. I want to stay on this piece here. So you're saying basically you want reparations in a way that is similar to making a massive bunch of bonds, basically. That style.
My plan will call for every qualified recipient to get their $2.8 to $3 million in cash bonds. And the American government will just pay interest on it instead of doing a large sum, which that would cause massive inflation. That way, it takes care of the debt issue and it avoids the super hyperinflation issue.
So basically, what happens is everyone who's qualified ADOS gets the equivalent of about $2.8 to $3 million. That's, you're not exact, but around that area.
Yes.
In government bonds. And the money they would get would not be the bond, but would be the interest from the bond. Now, does that go for a certain number of years, like a 5-year, 7-year, 10-year bond? Is that for the life of the person? How long does that go?
According to my plan, which is a living, breathing document, because we still have not gotten reparations, that it will take at least 3 years for it to mature. And that's the point where America says, all right, we've paid enough interest. We're going to take our yellow dollars now, give you green dollars, and we're done. So it will take about 3 years for that to happen.
Are you worried? And this has always been my worry. My worry has always been if all of a sudden you give anybody a bunch of money, and the example I use is the lottery. Most lottery winners, 5 years after they win the lottery are worse off. About 1/3 go bankrupt. Do we worry that that type of cash would in the long run hurt more than help? Or is that not a concern? Or are you not concerned about it?
I feel that's not our concern. I feel that reparations are a debt that was owed. When the Japanese Americans who were put in concentration camps in 1988, when I was 4 years old, received their reparations, and the checks started to be distributed in 1992 when I was 8 years old, they didn't have to submit a business plan. When the people who were exposed to radiation, a lot of them are dead, Now their children are receiving their payments. So Joe Crow Biden, as I call him, he just renewed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. No one's asking them for a business plan. We all know the Holocaust survivors. People like to say America did not pay reparations to Holocaust survivors. That's technically not true. The first thing America did, because my great-grandfather, who still lives, is a World War II veteran, the first thing America did was make the German administration give the Jews back land that was taken, and then they got a whole country that's pretty much being financed by America. No one asks them what you're going to do with the money. It doesn't matter how Black Americans, freemen, spend our money, it's ours. But I will say this. Look at the history of Black Americans. We came from having nothing, came out of slavery in almost naked, unfed, illiterate, unprotected. And we built not just the one Black Wall Street in Tulsa, we built multiple Black Wall Streets throughout this country. People like to say, well, y'all aren't the same people. Oh, yes, you will not insult me and say I'm not my ancestors. I am continuing my ancestors' legacy. Right now, when the stimulus checks went out, because contrary to popular beliefs, $1,000, $1,500 is not a lot of money at all. However, you can look it up. Black Americans started more new businesses than any other people. We have been, for the longest, the most prominent group of entrepreneurs. We start more businesses than any other group. Unfortunately, they tend to fail quicker than any other group because we don't have that generational wealth of which we were robbed to sustain ourselves during that period that when new businesses are still struggling to turn a profit.
So let me keep going down this road for a bit. If this is a good idea, and I think I'm going to agree with you on this one, but let me see what you have to say. Why aren't the elite Black leaders talking about it? Right? Why aren't they talking about it then? I mean, I'm already not a fan of most elite Black Americans who are supposed to speak for me already. But you tell me how you feel. Maybe am I wrong on this?
Well, I don't think we have any elite Black leaders. We definitely have elite Black leavers. They leave their community. They abandon their people. They turn their back on them. And I have more hatred and disdain and vitriol for them than I do for the typical anti-Black bigot who people usually think is a white person, but it can be another Black person, a Black person who's not from here. It could be a Black American. Or it could be a non-Black, non-white person, like an Asian person. But let me tell you, people have often said that one of the reasons why this country never does right by Black Americans, but they're quick to do right, like reparations that they've done for all these other groups, is because they need us to be a permanent underclass. But it's not just white people or anti-Black white people who need that. There are some Black people too who need us to be a permanent underclass because they too have the same mindset that anti-Black bigot may have. But the other thing is we are dealing with our sellouts and raccoons, as I will say, so your opinion doesn't get striked, who simply are all selfish and for themselves. Individualism is a huge problem in American society. Some of us celebrate it and think, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and do for yourself. The truth of the matter is Black Americans have always been more communal minded because we have been targeted as a community. But even during the days of slavery, there were always those when we were about to revolt or someone's planning an escape, they will always go to the enslaver and tell. During the days of the civil rights era, there were Black people who spoke against the movement. So these elite Black leavers are simply continuing the legacy of these pathetic, disgusting raccoons who have always been around.
Yes. Okay, we're on the same page. So yeah, I feel the same way. Everything you said, I completely agree with all of those. So let me then move on to the next piece then, which is Democrats. You're anti-Biden, and I find that so many more than ever, Black Americans, particularly Black men, Black women too, but not to the same level, are becoming more and more anti-Biden, and sometimes even more and more Democratic Party, even, but specifically Biden. But I think also starting to become more anti-Democratic Party. And many of the Black men I know are actually moving towards Trump and not Republicans, literally Trump. Like that's the guy. They're going towards him, not the party, as I think they're trying to find something else. I'll ask the question of you. Why aren't you deciding to run independent in some way not Democrat? Why challenge the big guy, Clyburn, when you could maybe go independent? Just a, I guess, a tactical question for you.
I used to tell, and I still tell my, I say to my students, you can't clean the house from the outside. Okay?
Right.
If the house is dirty, you have to go in the house and clean it. The Democrats know that first of all, let me be very clear. Black Americans, by and large, have been anti-Democratic Party. They don't get this whole myth that they get 90% of the black vote, but black vote simply means the black people who showed up to vote. We are ignoring the fact that, like most American demographics, most black Americans don't even bother to show up to vote. But by and large, over half do not bother to show up to vote during an off non-presidential election. And during even presidential election, it's still under 50%. So most black Americans have never been a big fan of the Democratic Party because they just said, okay, we've been voting for y'all for decades. We have almost all of our land is gone. Lower rates of home ownership there now. I can rattle off a list of the disgusting, unexcusable conditions that black America is in while illegal immigrants are thriving. Abortion of black babies is thriving. So I just want to be very clear. That's black men and black women. However, the Democrats, they bank on us being disgusted with them and yet not doing anything. They are used to us feeling we need to get a pollster and just protest from the outside and go home and go out and protest again. Not me. I realize that if the problem are the policy, because it's policy over party. If the problem are the policies that we are either being done that hurt us, like illegal immigration and abortion, or policies that we should have gotten that we have not, like reparations, politicians make the policy. So I said to myself, let me then run for office, become the politician. However, they usually bank on someone like me, a rarity. I'm trying to get more black Americans to run for office. They usually bank on us saying, if he hates us, then he won't run as a Democrat. No, that way they escape accountability. They escape face-to-face accountability. They will love for me to go run as a Republican. So that way, when they have their meetings, they can feel safe and comfortable and only have the black faces who show up and agree with them and everything. Not going to let them get off that easy. I ran as a Democrat, so every meeting, every convention they had, I'm going to be right there calling them out for the 60 years of failure, and yet 20 million black babies have been aborted. Illegal immigrants are in this country by 20 to 30 million and thriving, getting free food, housing, healthcare, transportation, flooding our borders right now. Gun violence has dropped from the historic levels of the 1970s and 1990s, but it is still unacceptably high. Black suicide of black boys 5 to 12 is for that age group the highest, which you've never had black people outpace white Americans in suicide rate until now. And yet you ask, what policy are they doing for freedmen, not black people, but the ones of the status who are descendants of those who were enslaved and emancipated? You won't find one thing besides they dust off that little HR 40 bill, which is a farce. So I ran as a Democrat to hold them accountable. The thing with third party, even with Dr. Cornel West and the Kennedy guy that's running, well, I don't know if he's running a Democrat third party, but Dr. Cornel West.
RFK is running Democrat. He's still running Democrat. Yep.
But with Dr. Cornel West, even with him running third party, it's hard to get traction as a third party just because of the way the uni party, that's the Republicans and the Democrats, the way they have things designed, they know most voters are on auto drive. Oh, you have an R by your name, voted for you, don't give a damn. We complain about these same parties. It's like my great-grandmother going to church every Sunday. She would complain about the church, complain about the pastor, and yet every Sunday she would be right there. Same thing, nothing changed. Most of us have that big Sunday church hat mentality. I said, I may not win. However, one of the things, and Bernie Sanders, who I absolutely despise, is a good example of this. Bernie Sanders has never won the presidency. He's come close.
Yep.
When he first ran, his platform of universal health care, tuition-free college, universities, canceling student debt, even some of the most liberals at that time thought that was extreme, even though Jesse Jackson had said those things in the 1980s. However, that is almost now the go-to platform for a lot of Democratic candidates. He pushed his issues in the party. He disrupted the party. The one thing I don't like the Republicans either. but I judge people by their policies and not their party. One thing I do like about the Republicans, though, they have more of a rebellious spirit. You are more likely, like, look at the shutdown that happened a year or so ago. The Republicans will hold the line and shut it down far more likely than a Democrat will. And when I say Democrats, I'm about the leaders, not the people who vote for them. The Democrats have no rebellion in them. They are just weak, jello spine,
and they're proud of it.
And proud of it too. Going on, get on. I said, well, if someone other than a few like Nina Turner, who's not currently elected in the position, you don't really get anyone who calls them out. Well, now you have a second person. I may not be currently elected, but I am running for office in that party. And if I feel things may change on the line, I'll do that. But I'm never going to cease calling them out and putting pressure on them to do right by my people and trying to replace them.
I like it. Let me grab a couple comments if I could. Roger Meadows has chimed in. Roger says, Larry, I learned a lot from Marcel. Glad he came along. The term American Freedman, which is written into the congressional record. I also learned about the Freedmen Bureau of Savings and Trust Bank. Two pieces. Like, I got to tell you, I also did not know that Freedman was an official term. Yes. That was something new for me. I did not know. I always use ADOS. That's what I always used. But I like Freedman. Freedman sounds better, but I just didn't know it, to be forward with you. This is a new term for me. And then the Freedmen Bureau Savings and Trust Bank. This is a bank that actually went under, didn't it? The bank went under. Is that correct? I remember the story right.
It was
sabotage. Thank you.
By a combination of these non-profits, or at least a version of them at that time. I know a lot of people here in your chat are libertarian leaning. And I know with libertarians, there's always a thing with nonprofits and government intervention. Well, the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Bank is a good example. I have several family members that I found through FamilySearch.org and Census Bureau who had accounts in the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Bank. And that bank was sabotaged by so-called white philanthropic people who wanted to help the Negroes. They deliberately sabotage it with the government intervention. Now, the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Bank was a private initiative, technically, but the government got involved in helping to sabotage it. And the government helped to support its establishment. They pretty much encouraged people. And the sad thing was, a lot of those people who put their hard-earned money were formerly enslaved people, the first generation of freedmen, who were veterans who fought for the Union in the Civil War and lost all their hard-earned savings.
Hold on for 1 second. If I remember the story right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the idea was the concept, or the intent, I should say, the intent was a good intent, right? The intent was to provide a specialized bank for freedmen so they can put their money in, so they can get a great benefit from that. They can get good interest, be able to borrow money to start business, whatever. The intent was a good intent. It just got corrupted by government and by what sadly Malcolm X would say, white liberals. Is that right?
Oh, yes, definitely white liberals. That generation's white liberals. I am never going to excuse or pretend like anti-Black American racism from white conservatives is more preferable. But the difference is you usually will know where you stand with a white conservative. They are usually far more blatant. I'm not saying that's acceptable with their anti-Blackness. White liberals will make you feel so good, make you feel at ease, make you feel comfortable, make you think that, you know, we're about to see change around here, and then get in office and do what Marianne Williamson did to me. When I went to one of her rallies and I told her reparations plan need to be revised, she did something worse than what any white liberal has done to me. She pretty much did the let's try to get a black man lynched by trying to accuse me of being anti-Semitic. It didn't go well for her at all because I don't back down to those little buzzwords, anti-Semitic, anti-Semitism. I stood my ground, let her know. That's what white liberals do. It was a good idea. And a lot of Black Americans, that was an era of heartbreak and disappointment. Reconstruction. Yes. I know some of your listeners may not agree at all with reparations. That's why I'm out here. I am not going to beg a bigot to not be a bigot. Bigots just need to die. However, there are many white people and Black people and people who are not Black, not white, who may not agree with reparations because they may have questions about it. They may not understand some things about it. However, I want people to remember Reconstruction was supposed to be America's promise to freedmen that they were going to close all inequities that were caused by chattel slavery. They realized that just simply slavery being ended was not, abolished was not enough. That's why Abraham Lincoln and General Sherman did the 40 acres of mule. Unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and the little bit of land that was distributed, they took. There was one report saying you can hear black people crying for miles away when the land they got was taken from them and given to the Confederates who had just fought against the country. Then they had to deal with
the funny thing is, a lot of people don't know that we actually gave reparations to the slave owners.
And a lot of people don't know that.
They don't know that, but that's actually true. It's true.
A lot of people also don't know, even though most Americans, white Americans at least, and this is not me demonizing white Americans. I have said in a commercial, I'm not mad this government has helped white Americans. I'm mad as hell that they still have yet to do right by black Americans, and people want to tell me that while I am seeing other groups that have gotten repair and right now who aren't even Americans, like illegal immigrants who are getting resources galore, people want to tell black Americans that simply because they stopped on paper doing chattel slavery, they stopped on paper doing Jim Crow and redlining, that's enough. It's not enough to stop the wrong you have done. You have to repair the damage the wrong caused. Ronald Reagan pretty much said that when he did reparations for the Japanese Americans. A lot of those ones who were interned were dead. That's why if you read the bill, it was allowed to go to a surviving spouse or their children. She said if the government has caused an issue, the government needs to repair it. And back to what I was saying about Reconstruction, it was an era of heartbreak and betrayal. The first thing black Americans did after slavery was abolished was run for office. South Carolina is the state, the only state in America that had a majority black state legislator. All of them were assassinated. Okay. And the one, well, not all, I take that back, but a lot of them were assassinated.
No, they were violently removed, whether it was through threat or through death or through beating.
Some served their term. Some served their term, but they went through a lot of violence. The ones on the state level, some were assassinated, some went through extreme violence. We had our land that we were supposed to get taken from us. Then we put our money in a bank, crashed, stolen from us. Then Jim Crow, redlining, and sharecropping, which was chattel slavery 2.0, all were introduced. Sharecropping will last until the 1960s. Jim Crow and redlining in states like South Carolina until the 1970s. People cannot say they support justice and say that reparations are not due from the government that caused the problem.
So let me grab a couple more comments if I can. Rick says, Black America has long been the leading edge for the rest of us. The pale folks, as he calls them, I like that, the pale folks, who aren't wealthy, are not so different and are more interdependent from our black neighbors than most suspect. I think there is an issue, right? This is, I think, one of the problems that you'll find, and I'm glad you brought this up. You find many poor Americans who are white or Hispanic or Asian, not as many Asian, but Asian too, do the what about me, right? What about me? What about me? And to your point, I don't have a problem with America helping everybody out. I don't.
Exactly.
This, in my view, isn't well, you can't have yours. It's let's just get ours. But please have yours too. Someone else once, when I was talking about this, came up and said, well, what about reparations for some of the Irish who were brought over here in chains? And I said, awesome. You should put your plan together. I'm not against it. If that's what you feel, put your plan together. Let's talk about it. Maybe there's something. And again, that's not an issue that I know well at all. Maybe it's time to educate us on it. I'm okay with that too, whatever the case may be. So yes. Let me see here. I'll grab a couple more if I could.
May I address that?
Please, go ahead.
People I am sure there are millions of Americans who have hardships. Even rich white Americans are dealing with mental illness, are dealing with drug abuse, are dealing with all types of issues. Individual hardships, however, are not the same as government-caused hardships. Reparations is not about racism. That's a big misconception. That's what the white liberals do, and they know it's disingenuous. They make it about racism. Yes, anti-black racism was the contributing factor or was the cause of all the wrong the government did. But reparations is about a debt the government owes to the people that they wrong. It's not to solve racism. It's not to say other people don't have issues and only black people have issues. It's the government saying we caused this issue and we directly caused it. We need to solve it. The federal, everything that happened in this country, whether at the state level, because some people say, well, I think the states should handle it. The states, South Carolina was at the tip of the spear when it came to anti-Black American, anti-freeman hate. But the states would never have been able to do that if the federal government would have checked them and said, that's not constitutional. And the people who have individual hardships, candidates, a good candidate should be doing policies all the time to help people with their individual hardship. So if you are a white person in Appalachia or in states where white people, in states like Kentucky, where there's a good number of very poor white people, your elected official should be doing positive all the time. If they're not, and that's why, Larry, I want to say, and I hope your listeners are listening. The reason I say repair Black America to fix America, now I say repair Black America to save America, is because I need white people, especially, to understand what they've done to Black Americans was just training for what they are going to do to you. So
yes. Oh my God, yes.
I've always said to the white Americans, so if you do not realize you're digging the deepest hole when you say that we don't deserve reparations, you're saying that 400 years of this government, as a British colony and as an independent American government, being the most violent towards its citizens, that almost on record, was okay. What message are you sending this same government then? So now I hear white people complaining, and I know some people may not like Trump, but I still have people who even don't like him say the government is using their power to go after an adversary, which is unfair. I hear white people complaining about police brutality. Now you have white people who are getting gentrified out of their neighborhoods.
Yes.
By rich agents in some parts of California. Black Americans were saying all of these things in more for centuries. White Americans are saying,
let me please just jump on top of this, because I agree with you so much. Gun control was made to keep guns out of the hands of freed slaves, and now white people are out there in New Mexico pissed off about the government taking their guns. That was because you let them do it to the Black people back in the 1870s. You let them do it then, and now they came to you. The war on drugs. Look, my mother was an addict, right? I know in the 80s and 90s, opioids was destroying the Black community. Now it's destroying the white community. Now they're mad. Well, yeah, it had hit us first, right? Everything hits us first, then it comes to everybody. I say that all the time on the show, right? If you don't, it's the old, first they came for the trade unionists, then they came for the communists, then they came for the Jews, then there was no one except when it came for me, right? It's the same thing.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to get white people to understand. Now, like I said, you are not going to change a diehard bigot. A diehard bigot just needs to die. They are holding everyone back. The problem is some white Americans really have this belief that America just won't ever do them the way they've done Black people. James Baldwin said, a lot of white people know one thing for sure, that they will never want to be Black. And when he said that, he means treat it the way that they all know the way America has done and continues to do Black people. What I am trying to say again to white people, not just gun control, but whether it is the issue with police brutality. I've seen that's happen more and more. All of now the election integrity. White people are saying their elections are being interfered. They're not valid. Black people went through that for centuries. And now it's happening to y'all. It's only going to get worse. When this government was being tyrannical to Black Americans, the majority of white people at that time sat back and let it, or they supported it. And now it's turning on you. The best thing to do for this country is to say, if you treat one American like this, you're treating all of us like this, and I'm not going to accept it. So if you did reparations for these Americans, you cannot say I'm not going to do it for these ones, because if you make an exception for them, then when you do us wrong and it's time to pay up, you will make an exception for us and say, nope, not going to do it for you. So some are getting it.
You actually have some libertarian fans here. Paula says, preach and run. She's all about it. She's with you. She also says,
Thank
white
you.
liberal philanthropy scares me, and I'm white. So there we go.
It's very scary.
The Rocket Man says, libertarian and support reparations. So you have some of them too. So you're winning, I guess. I think it's Demi says, haha, Republicans and Democrats. She likes your response there. Yes. So so let me move on, if I could, to policy. I know we spent lots on reparations. I appreciate you going through your thoughts on reparations. It's a very tough thing to talk about. It's very emotional on both sides. And my audience often asks me to talk about things like this because my show, I don't mind talking about race. I don't talk that often about race, but I do sometimes. And my audience is kind of happy when I talk about it because they often don't feel comfortable talking about race in general. So they're happy when I talk about it here. But let me go to other pieces you bring up. You bring up the idea of the deeper problems: education, manufacturing, energy in your area. There's a couple things that I found very interesting about that. You think you have to completely refund education, almost more centralizing versus decentralizing. I think I'm not sure if that trend is going that way or not. In the states, most states are centralizing power instead of decentralizing. And I think it's failing in most states. You're thinking, is it, I guess, is the funding that comes from the federal government or the control from the federal government? What is your issue with the federal government in education?
The issue with education, public education, my plan calls for a change in the way public education is funded right now. And that's why, and people have called me Republican, they call me Trump, so they can call me what the hell they want. What you won't call me is a sellout and a raccoon. You can say that, but you'll be proven false. Education, public education is currently funded if you're born in a poor area and you have a very low tax base, then your schools are going to be funded very poorly. If, like, I live in a town called Ridgeland, 29936, a very poor town in South Carolina. It's gotten a little richer only because old white retirees are moving here because they made some retirement communities. But if you took them out, and trust me, they are taken out because their tax dollars that they pay don't go to us. You take them out, this will still be one of the poorest areas of South Carolina. Because I'm in this poor county, the local tax dollars that come from property taxes are this low. Going next door to Beaufort County, which has one of the richest towns in South Carolina, if not the richest, Bluffton, South Carolina, 29910, just like 15, 20 minutes from me, their property taxes are this high. So you go there, they're able to offer more courses, but it's not just courses offered, it's also networking. You have kids there who are the children of lawyers, who are the children of organic chemists, who are all these very lavish professions that the kids who go to that school are able, with whom they're able to network. So I am calling for, this country funds the military. We often say that the military is a matter of national security. A lot of when we tend to overlook security. One of the biggest threats to a country is a breakdown of the family.
Yes.
And a population that is uneducated. We should be funding public education as if it's a matter of security, because the Democrats and the Republicans, they love an uneducated populace. They love a general society that's just going to go vote for whomever has an R or a D without analyzing what they're saying. So my thing is saying this: there should be, unlike South Carolina that says a minimally adequate education, there should be a benchmark amount that we do through a commission that every county in every state should have for kids to at least get exposure, properly educated. And if a county is not able to meet that standard of funding, I'm saying the federal government should fail in that funding. It should go directly to the school districts. There should be accountability. I've seen plenty of frivolous spending when there's no accountability and overhead.
Yes.
I'm not saying I want Big Brother, but no, you don't have to do Big Brother to get accountability. There should be accountability, but I'm saying that money should go directly to the school districts so to help them meet that standard of funding so that kids can have the best chance at getting a quality education.
Okay. I want to, if I could real fast, I want to talk to my audience for a minute. Guys, if you're watching this and you're liking what you see, do me a favor, click that like button. I need you to click the like button. It really does matter. The more like times you click it, the more it'll get past the algorithms, the more people see this, the larger the show gets. Please click the like button. It really does matter. If you're happen to be watching this on Twitter, retweet this right now. Just click the retweet, the repost. Do it right now. It does matter. If you want your chat to go to the front, super chat me. If you happen to be on YouTube watching this, it matters. And something else, this guy's here sitting in front of you, running for office, giving you his heart. Then you know what? Support him in return. Head over to Marcel for Congress, Marcel for the number 4 Congress. Check out his website, what he's doing over there. If you think it's something that you like, support him. He could use both time and money. He needs volunteers and cash, of course. So either one of those if you want to give. If you live in South Carolina, you can probably go meet him someplace. He's out there campaigning. Probably find him at someone's event. You go out and see what he's doing. If you can do that, it would be amazing. Let me go to the next spot if I could. And you have been someone, and this is a growing thing I find also, Bitcoin in the Black community. I have had 2 separate people who are Bitcoin just enthusiasts, both Black, on my show in the last 3 months. And this has becoming a thing. And you're on board too. In fact, you're on board with something I was thinking about for New York State when I was running last year. I talked about the idea of building a nuclear power plant in upstate New York to specifically for funding, bit mining and blockchain mining and Bitcoin mining. You have a similar idea in South Carolina. It's the same, but similar with tidal power. Is that right? Help me to figure this one out.
So all this talk about, solar energy and, of course, harvesting the wind and things, harnessing the wind. And I support all of that. But it's strange how we overlook tidal energy. Tidal energy simply comes from something that is always going to happen. The rising and the lowering of the tides and the massive amount of energy that is given off. I live in a coastal area. Always been there in the coastal area. My district is coastal. So we have the Atlantic Ocean right there by us. And the Atlantic Ocean, of course, has a rising and the lowering of the tides. I have the one research says that just one, is 10 to 20 times more powerful than a current nuclear bomb. Okay. And that's just rising and the lowering of the tide of even a small body of water, like a river. So I am saying that's true clean energy. You hear a lot of this talk about clean energy. You hear all these crazy ideas. Don't eat meat. Everyone buy an electric vehicle. That is so out of touch to me. The average person cannot even afford to maintain their 1999 model vehicle that's falling apart. And I'm not denigrating people. I've been there, and heck, I'm still one coin away from being there. A lot of people are struggling right now. A lot of people in poverty drive their vehicles in a condition that is dangerous because they cannot afford to maintain it. Whether it is whether it's tires, brakes. That's liberalism going wild. The Republicans have another way of expressing their hate in this thing. Liberalism comes with these absolutely disgusting, despicable, out of touch, elitist ideas. Buy electric vehicles, but those vehicles have only increased, and their research is iffy on whether they truly help with the environment or not. However, tidal energy will be a clean source of energy from something that happens all the time, and it will be a boom in jobs to my area. And unlike some of these other initiatives that come to my area, I will hire the people here. Yes. I will educate the people here. They came to my small town of Ridgeland getting all excited about solar energy. They have a city of solar cells. It's literally, they put a sound force field around it because the solar panels hum. And the people complain about the humming. So now they have some invisible shield around it that blocks out the sound. All this modern futurist technology, and you won't find one person, or maybe you'll find one, and they ain't gonna be a black person who works there from my area. All people they've imported from other parts of America, from Europe. Same thing with a lot of the top positions, not necessarily all, but in some companies like Gulfstream and Boeing, they do a very good job of employing local people. I do want to give them credit for that. But when it comes to some of the top positions like the engineers, we need to be investing in local talent, educating local talent. With my plan for tidal energy, I will do that. And as far as Bitcoin goes, what I believe is Black Americans, look, we've had 20 million acres that we've accounted for. 20 million acres of our land stolen. 20 million since 19.
Well, hold on. You told me you said something. One of your interviews, I forgot which one it was. You said, and maybe I got the number wrong. You said something like 80% of Black Americans
90%.
lost 80%. Sorry, please go ahead.
90% of our land has been stolen from 1910 to 1997. That's not accounting for all the horrors happening in the 1800s. And they stopped counting at 1997. So that's not accounting for what has happened since 1997. Do you know when you lose land, you use wealth? I work with white people, and some of them, when we on the teaching is a horrific job, not because teaching is not rewarding, but because of all the politics that gets into it, and these administrators and student discipline, a whole other thing. And some teachers, mainly my white colleagues, said, "I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm out." And that they will say, "Well, I got to work. I'm not rich." So I will say to them, "Well, Amy or Robin, how are you going to survive? You just said you need to work." They said, "Well, my grandfather has some property and he just borrowed against it, and I'm going to look for a job in between it." And then 2 years later, they still aren't working, and yet they're not suffering any. They may not be getting a regular income, but they have wealth. Land is one of those safety nets. So when you lose land, use money. 20 million acres, and with a lot of Black Americans, we live in what are some of the most sought after areas? That's trillions of dollars stolen from us. Bitcoin, I guess, is allowing Black Americans, freedmen, to have an opportunity to get real estate, because it's technically virtual real estate that a person could purchase. I haven't necessarily said I am going to, people sometimes say, "Well, I represent to be in Bitcoin." I will never agree to that. It's going to be in whatever currency that the U.S. government is using. But however, I have said I will definitely do research into industries that have potential to be promising, and that does include Bitcoin.
Yeah, because I feel the same way. I feel like Bitcoin is a way of, in the past for sure, and still now, but not as bad. But in the past for sure, freedmen were literally pushed out of industries, right? When it comes to anything blockchain, it's a whole lot harder to do that. I mean, it's really hard to push Black people out of that industry. I mean, I guess it could be done somehow, but you really got to work for that one, right? So the odds of a system like a blockchain becomes race neutral by default, right? So you hustle and you get it done, or you don't. It doesn't matter where you come from, your background, whatever. So I see why that feels attractive. It does to me too. I think in both cases it feels attractive to me also. So I get it. That's why you like the Bitcoin and you like the idea of the tidal energy, which I like that a lot. I'm impressed by that. So let me ask you, right, before we wrap this up, is there something I've missed? Something you want to talk about? Some topic that I didn't touch on that you really want to get out?
Not necessarily. My main goal has been to try to get people, and people often think when I say this, I'm only talking to Black Americans or freedmen, those of us who are descendants of the ones who were enslaved and emancipated. No, I'm talking about anyone who is justice-minded, right-hearted. We cannot just be the people complaining on the outside. There's nothing wrong with organizing on the outside of the system. There's nothing wrong with showing up and making our voice heard and calling our elected officials. But if our elected officials have constantly failed us, neglected us, it is time for us to stop going to them, engaging them, and it's time for us to organize to replace them. That means one of us becomes the candidate, the rest of us become the candidate's team. That's the movement I want. So I've been saying to Black Americans who have lost the most, who have the most still to lose, who are neglected the most, I am tired of the marching down the street with a poster. Yes, we need that. That brings visibility and attention to a matter. However, I said there are two people. The one who's an elected official, the one outside with a poster yelling at the elected official to do what they feel they deserve. I'm tired of being the one outside with a poster. Let's organize. Let's take the energy. Let's take a percentage of that energy, because there's a lot more energy to organize, be angry, be upset. Let's take a percentage of the energy we're using to protest, and let's organize. Let one of us become the candidate, the rest of us become the candidate's team nationwide, and let's get in office and let's become the official that we want and get the policies that we desire. That's what all these other groups do. We can make fun of Margie Taylor Greene or whatever her name is, all we want. But her people supported her, and she's in office. She can make policy, and we cannot. So we making fun of her, and yet she's in a position of immense power. Instead of us making fun of her, how about we imitate her, and we will do it better and get in office? And that's all I want to say.
I love it. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank
Everybody else
you
who was watching, guys, thank you so much for watching. Give me a chunk of your evening. I appreciate it. I will see you all very soon.